Having a good Friday night?
I know.
Hello, Zoom. We're going to give a few people a few minutes to join. I already see some folks hopping in. Right up the road, Barb Randall in Orlando, Florida is in the house. Kim Bossy, a whole bunch of folks over there at Birch Road Cellar in Chicago. We're going to talk about you guys in a second, giving a lot more people a chance to join. Hopefully everyone on Facebook can hear me. Sam and I are competing on backgrounds. His is likely more real than mine, but we are really going to have a fantastic night tonight because we've got a bunch of special things happening. And it really is going to be show-stopping because we're trying some things we've never done before, which is what we do at Cellar Angels. So I'll give this another 10 or 15 seconds while people jump on. Nick Schramm, Kay Jurica, John Lalaganis, Jeff and Jane Greasy are in the house as usual, 30 Fridays in a row. Hans Greasy, new resident of Colorado, right up the road from Sean Manning and Marilyn Manning. Stacy Dvorak, Tom Randall in a different room than his wife Barb, but both on the broadcast this evening. I don't understand that. We call them Rob and Laura Petrie. I'm dating myself. Sam doesn't even know the Dick Van Dyke Show. He's too young. All right, everyone, we're going to get started. Welcome, Facebook. Welcome, Zoom. This is this is SIP, Shelter in Place 30. 30 weeks in a row since the initial order was put in effect back in February. Every Friday night, you've invited us into your living rooms, dining rooms, patios, back porches to share some great wine with some great individuals. And tonight is no different. The folks that are on Zoom, the folks that are on Facebook participating, and everyone at Birch Road, we want to raise a glass to you because as we say at Cellar Angels, we actually don't have customers, we have supporters, and they support us through thick and thin. They're a little bit more loyal than a customer. They want to see the company succeed because they know our mission, and our mission is something we're all involved in, and that's really transformation. So we're all kind of social entrepreneurs. And this whole thing has now been going on for 10 years. And they know that every single person who buys wine through Cellar Angels gets to pick a charity, and the funds that we donate to that charity change lives. So we're leveraging the habit of fantastic wines. And as we say often here at Cellar Angels, we drink serious wines. We just don't take ourselves too seriously. And with the shelters in place, not showing any signs of slowing down, we're booked throughout the rest of the year and getting into early January. So stick with us. We're going to be coming into your living rooms for quite some time. We are thrilled to welcome with us this evening, Emma from Ink Factory. So Emma, if you would make yourself appear.
Hello.
Emma from Ink Factory is going to be encapsulating and memorializing in ink exactly what Sam and I are talking about this evening. So it is an amazing system, and we're going to post the final artwork at the end, shortly after the end of the hour, and it's really going to be pretty impressive. You know, we talk, she draws, and at the end of this, we get to see it all. So Emma, thanks so much for participating.
Thanks, Martin.
And then obviously Kim at Birch Road. I hope you guys have the glasses filled and are getting ready to learn about, taste some Riesling. And we thank everyone for going out, social distancing, because another thing we say at Cellar Angels, just because we have to social or physically distance doesn't mean we have to social distance. So here we all are together. And that was a really long intro because I can't wait to get to our first guest, and well, technically our only guest this evening. But Sam Baxter and I have known each other for quite a few years, and he's been a friend of the company, and we've actually been a friend of Terra Valentine and Sam's for going on the better part of a decade. We used to carry some of the production wines that were in the distribution channel at our wine store in Chicago, but it was really kind of some of the smaller production stuff that has always attracted us, and we've been enamored with Sam for years and years and years. And tonight we're going to dig into a couple of those and discuss everything that's happening in Napa. So without much further ado, I want to introduce everyone to Sam Baxter of Terra Valentine. Sam, thanks for spending your Friday with us.
Hey, yeah, cheers. Thanks for having me, Martin. And it's been like you said, many years since I met you in Chicago and introduced you to the Terra Valentine wines. So it's great to kind of keep this going in a different format and to be able to kind of talk about, the past, the present, and the future of what we're doing. So thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure and honor. And for the wine club members on the call or on Facebook, they recognize Terra Valentine because we featured their wines in one of all three of our quarterly wine clubs earlier this year to rave reviews. And for those of you that had a personal favorite, we actually went and threw some of the wines up on the Cellar Angels website this evening. So if you want to grab something and replenish, absolutely do that, because they aren't going to be there for long. And Sam was kind enough and we had a couple extra. So we said, hey, let's do it during the SIP broadcast. So let's jump in, Sam, and say, obviously the backgrounds that we have, while they're virtual backgrounds, this is what you get to stare at every day. And you're up on Spring Mountain. So walk people through some of the landmarks or other wineries that they would drive past if they were going to come up and see the vineyards behind me.
Yeah, so I think the view that you have there is actually like from our ranch at the very top of Spring Mountain. So we're kind of looking out behind you over Paloma Vineyards, which is my neighbor up there at the top of the mountain. You've got Schweiger Vineyards in the background, kind of in the center. Smith Madrone off to the left, and just off to the left, you'd also have Barnett, Vineyard 7 and 8, Sherwin family, Barron's family. And then, my view behind me is from one of the vineyards lower down on Spring Mountain, the Wordle Vineyard, which was the vineyard that was where Terra Valentine really began. Angus and Margaret Wordle bought this vineyard behind me in 1995. So that's kind of where our mountain Cabernet journey began. And so this is looking kind of south over the town of St. Helena into the Napa Valley.
That is awesome. And I want to say hello to Scotland Kiefer, Diane Yetter, Debbie Long, Curtis Stanley, Don Silvestri. Don, we're neighbors now because we live in Florida. So you and I are going to become friends, especially if you golf. And by that, I mean, if you can get me on a golf course. So very nice to see you. Who else have I missed? Nick Schramm, I don't know if I got you. Tracy Smith, outstanding. Thank you all for joining, sitting here with Sam, I'm enjoying the Riesling. And I know you actually found your first Riesling. And so what year did you first make Riesling?
So yeah, I found a bottle of the 2008 in my cellar, and that was the very first vintage that we harvested Riesling from this vineyard, and it was kind of a fairly experimental, really, to plant Riesling on this vineyard property, and but other people on Spring Mountain have been making Riesling for since the 1950s. Stony Hill and Smith Madrone are two that have a very good track record making Riesling. But I wanted to make a drier style, so make something that's a little bit more reminiscent of the Alsatian Rieslings, or the Rieslings from Australia, which is actually where I kind of was introduced to bone dry style Riesling. And so we planted a little bit in kind of the shadier, cooler spots, right up about 1,800 feet elevation, and let it ferment completely dry. So there's no residual sugar, which is, most people, you say, hey, would you like some Riesling, or what do you, and they go, oh, either they love it or they just go, I don't really like sweet wines. So it can be somewhat polarizing, but I think, in this example, it's pretty exotic, and it drinks kind of like a Pinot Blanc, or but it has a little more aromatics, a little more tropical fruit, a little like really interesting citrus notes, and so I think it's a really unique expression of that grape.
Well, it's interesting too. And Adria Walker, hello. I've got a couple more folks. Jeanette Herniak and Amy Walker. Thank you so much for jumping on. You said something a second ago. You fermented it dry. What does that mean?
Well, so typically with Riesling production, they're gonna leave some residual sugar in the wine, and so depending on how high the acid is and at what level you pick it, additionally how much botrytis you might have in the Riesling, you're gonna have different levels of sugar that's left over in the fermentation, and sometimes they stop it by chilling it down. So they'll take the fermentation and then turn the cooling on and shut it down, right? So you end up with a certain amount of residual sugar there, or they'll add some back, and this has no sugar, so it's as dry as a Sauvignon Blanc. There's really no and so when I say ferment dry, I let the natural process of the yeast fermenting all the sugar take place, and when the wines are young, when these Rieslings are young, they tend to be pretty acidic and have like really powerful minerality. but as they age, you know, that acid starts to soften, and you get kind of a creaminess, a really soft, creamy texture, and the fruit is mingled in there. You get a little bit of those that oiliness that you can find in Riesling, but as that acid softens, and there's no sugar there to kind of cover that acid up, the wine becomes really, really kind of clean and crisp, and really holds on to that minerality as well.
Well, it's such an expressive varietal. And for those of us that were ruined on Riesling because of blue bottles that were in our refrigerator or in our grandmother's refrigerator, it was always cloyingly sweet. It
Right.
was, you know, just that syrupy, unctuous style that was not good. And so it was almost as you were turned off by Riesling. But you're right. This one, interestingly enough, could almost pass for a Sauv Blanc, like you said, but it has some really steely minerality on it, a lot of nuance, a lot of the tropical fruit. I'd be curious what the 2008 is tasting like.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the color is a little bit darker, but you know, for a 12-year-old white wine, it's still very lively on the palate. The fruit is kind of, I would say, you know, the younger vintage. What do you have? The 13, right? That's the I believe it's the 13. You know, that's going to have more like lemon curd and like really kind of bright citrus notes. And the 08 is tending to lean more towards like marmalade. So it's kind of like an orange. There's a slight bit of kind of bitterness on the finish from kind of those citrus notes, and that oiliness, those kind of those terpenes, that real tropical fruit is there, but it's got a little bit more of this this oily character, which is also something that is really specific to the Riesling varietal.
Tracy Smith, hello. Amy McGowan is in the house. Amy, a big, longtime Cellar Angel and Napa Valley super fan. So Amy, thanks for joining us. What was the decision? How did you decide to, you said it was kind of an experiment. Did you lose a bet experiment? Did you, how much were you
I think it was so we had areas, we were planting this 25-acre vineyard. We called it the Yverdon Vineyard. It was on the side of the old Yverdon property up at the top of Spring Mountain. And historically, they had grown Gewürztraminer there. And there were some cool spots on the property that just were not going to be suited for red wines. So, you know, we kind of ran through the options. Okay, Chardonnay, but not, you know, the Angus Wurtel was not a big fan of Chardonnay, didn't drink a lot of it. We thought Sauvignon Blanc, but then we were like, well, we can get really good Sauvignon Blanc from the Valley Floor or other locations. And so kind of through process of elimination and somewhat my sort of winemaking contrarian attitude, where I was like, what can I do that's totally different? What can we have that, you know, there's some history on this mountain, but it's not something that everyone's going to have in their wine club. And so, you know, I really felt like Riesling was going to be a fun challenge and adventure for us. And I think we had a great time with it. It was really a lot of fun. And typically we ended up having to kind of pour a glass and serve it to people rather than ask them if they wanted Riesling. You know, if you say, hey, would you like some Riesling? Most people be like, yeah, you know, maybe not. But when you say, here's a glass of white wine, and they would say, wow, this is amazing. It's really different, really exotic. So it was fun. We really turned a lot of people on to dry Riesling.
Well, and I think, and Kim, I'd be interested at Birch Road what the audience's consensus is on the Riesling, because to your point, yeah, you've got an 08, so that has some longevity and age on it. The 13, 7 years is still, you know, nothing to frown at. I mean, that's a considerable amount of time for a white wine specifically. And this is still extremely lively, has great acidity. Like I said, very racy minerality and a lot of depth and nuance of some of those tropical notes that you talked about. So it's very impressive. So I'd be very curious what some of the other folks in the chat are talking and seeing what they're super clean, well-rounded, bright. I was surprised on my first sip, not at all was I was expecting. So a lot of folks, I think, are quite pleasantly surprised by this wine.
Fantastic.
How many cases? I can't remember that.
We just did a couple hundred cases of this wine, so it's very small production. You know, something we never put into distribution. It was only for our wine club. We poured it in our tasting room, and so it never really made it very far out of the winery.
That's fantastic. And I love the idea of when people come up for a taste or whatever, you just hand them a glass of this. Just kind of, because let's be honest, getting up and down Spring Mountain is a journey in and of itself.
Right.
And so people want to have their whistles wet at the end of that journey. And this is absolutely a great wine to do that with.
Absolutely.
And in addition to not only we have Emma drawing for us, we've got Kim hosting a large party. We actually have an in-house studio audience here for Cellar Angels because we're getting ready to go public, and we have our bank examiner. Actually, no, we're not going public. These are two of our friends and Denise's BFF, so she's going to introduce them. Okay, good. Michelle and RJ are in the house. They actually have been sedated, so not a lot of talking out of them right now.
Enjoying the wine.
Enjoying the wine. Both of them confessed that this surprised them, and they're very interested in this wine, and it really is, especially for the heat down in Florida. This is a fantastic wine. So there, and Jeff Greasy never thinks Denise is here. So again, proof that in fact she exists.
This is another like wine pairing. If for this Riesling, if you enjoy like oysters, raw oysters, it's really a stunning pairing to pair raw oysters with this Riesling. Like it really brings out those citrus notes, that minerality. It's really a great pairing. But any kind of seafood will do well with it. But we used to have kind of Riesling and oyster parties with this wine, and it was always really a fun event.
Well, I could imagine this, like you said, with any shellfish, but boy, oysters sounds fantastic. And again, so you got turned on the Riesling, did you say Alsace?
Well, it's really, and originally when I was in Australia, I worked down there I guess it was the 1999 harvest. I got introduced to some of these, the Riesling from the Clare Valley, the Eden Valley, and just had never had bone dry Riesling before. And then as I kind of expanded on that and found that, the Alsatian style, as I began to research and kind of learn more about it, found that region to be kind of an area that produced pretty exceptional drier styles. But it's, those are all, they're very different. I mean, Spring Mountain and Riesling is kind of its own animal altogether. So
I love the experiment, and I was unaware that it was actually in the portfolio because obviously when we first met at a distribution event, it wasn't there. And then coming up, to taste, it wasn't something that we probably started with. So this has been a fantastic surprise because it is really, really a refreshing wine. We have a question from Tracy. Where was it planted on the site, and why did you choose that section of the estate? And I'm going to say because it was cooler.
Yeah, so we actually had I think 3 different spots on the property where we had little parcels of Riesling planted, and they were mostly on the areas that either got a lot of shade in the morning or shade in the afternoon. So you kind of wanted the red grapes to get more full sun exposure, and then the Riesling were kind of down at the bottoms of the blocks or up at the kind of the edges where they tended to get more shade, and so they didn't require as much sun exposure to get ripe, and actually help to hold on to that acidity by not getting it quite as warm in the afternoons.
Fantastic. I'm a big fan. Doug Rutherford, hello, sir. Thanks for joining. So walk us through the portfolio. And I know we're going to get to the big cabs. I did have someone, Scotland Kiefer, who admitted, because we have a very authentic, honest fan base. Sam, he said, I'm being contrarian tonight. I don't have the Riesling, but he has the Fountaingrove Cabernet, and it kills.
Nice.
So very excited about that. But so walk me through this portfolio, because it's grown, it's shrunk. You've got just so much great wine. How do you decide what actually makes it in the bottle?
Well, it has evolved over the years. With our first vintage being in 1999, and now 21 years later, there's definitely been some evolution over time, and our focus has always been red wines and bigger style, full-bodied mountain wines. But I've always liked to kind of balance out the portfolio with some lighter reds as well. And so But, with the white wines, it's really centered around the vineyard and finding out spots that, finding vineyards that produce really distinct wines. So our current white wine that we have now is that we're just pouring is our Kick Ranch Sauvignon Blanc. So it's a Sauvignon Blanc from the Fountaingrove District, so just to the west of Spring Mountain in Sonoma, and mountain grown Sauvignon Blanc. So it's very phenolic, it's very structured. And then I make a Pinot Noir go ahead, Martin.
Phenolic?
Phenolic.
I'll take phenolic for 500, please, Alex.
Yeah, so the grape skins are loaded with compounds
Right.
that are kind of phenolic compounds. That's where the tannin, that's where the color comes from. These are all and white wine typically, you're pressing those grapes right off right as you get them into the winery, so you're minimalizing the skin contact. But with really intense sites and wines that, grapes that are maybe have thicker skins, in mountain grown white wines, for instance, you can get a little bit more structure, and that phenolic structure in a white wine comes from those skins. So you're not getting color from those skins, but you are getting texture and weight and body to the wine.
Well, the audience is going to be thrilled to know that what is phenolics is not a poll question. So, but I do think that it's always beneficial when you hear a term to just ask, okay, well, hang on, what did that mean? Because from an education standpoint, the more we know about something, the more it becomes enjoyable. And so I appreciate you taking the time there. But I do want to actually launch our first poll question. So I know this is the amount of the time in the evening where people push the kids out of the way and they want to get to the computer keyboard. So get ready because we got poll question number 1. Sam has been walking these vines since acquiring the property in late 2007, since he was a child in 1999, while he was trailing his winemaker father as a child. And I do these questions, Sam, literally like a month ago, so I don't remember them. We've got 55% of the people voted, and you can't say anything just yet. So I see a lot of back and forth. Interesting. All right, we're going to give this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There may be no right answer, but there's probably a really, really close answer. Because I think I have the year screwed up, and I'm not certain. Like you said, your father was a consultant, but he was a winemaker later on, right?
Yeah, no, he is still a winemaker. He started making wine in the Napa Valley in 1969. So he's worked for a number of different wineries and, helped start up some really famous wineries. I mean, so he's been around the Valley quite a while. So I did grow up following him around, following in his footsteps for sure.
Perfect. So actually, 60% of the audience got that right. For the people that did not pick C, you can re-ante. This round increases the ante. It's like the blinds go up now. So the next question is going to be a little bit tougher. Let's move on to the red wines. And you grew up in the Valley, so obviously Cabernet is king and has been, but I know some folks are into the Merlot right now. So what is your philosophy on the red wine portfolio, and talk to us about, here's what I'm trying to get out of each vineyard block or each vineyard site and what I want it to do.
Well, again, going back to growing up there, and, I would sit around the dining room table with my dad. I was in high school and he'd bring wines home to blend, and he'd be, working on his Cabernet or his Merlot. And he'd say, okay, I'm going to try a little bit of this Cabernet into the Merlot. And he'd, give me a glass, say, well, okay, what do you think? And I'd say, well, I like that. And, so I started learning really, some of the first things I learned in winemaking was that art of blending and the magic between those grapes, the Merlot, the Cabernet Sauvignon, the Cabernet Franc, and how they can really bring out the best in each other, and really how a winemaker can kind of channel those wines into his or her particular style objectives, what they want that wine to become. And so, with Cabernet being, the king, the most age-worthy, the biggest most powerful wine, you know, I've always been captivated by the elegance of Merlot, the finesse, the way that you can have such beautiful dark fruit, and without that tannin structure, you know, and Cabernet Franc to me, you know, is really captivating with its elegance and its richness, you know, the mid-palate weight that it can bring, and the floral notes that it has that Cabernet doesn't have. So sometimes I feel like Cabernet can be this really like big sturdy wine, but the Merlot and Cabernet Franc are maybe the more like, you know, more complex wines to work with. And so to me, you know, you can't have just one of those. Like for me, I need those three wines in my cellar to be able to make the Cabernets great, make the Merlot great, and make great Cab Francs. They all have to be there working together at some level.
Well, I have a couple folks who shall remain nameless, Nelson Holden, with regards to, they want to see where you're actually located. And so we do a segment with Google Earth that is really a show-stopping number. So let's get to Google Earth, because it is oftentimes the favorite part of the presentation. And let's hope Google Earth behaves. So here we go. And I've got some orientation for you, Sam, and actually for the audience, so we can see kind of, if we pull back, it's kind of interesting that you can see really how close the Pacific is and the maritime influence there. And then, you know, mid-valley right in this area, up valley, St. Helena, even further, Calistoga. And if we just kind of zoom in, you can very easily see how the topography changes. And you talked specifically early on about mountain fruit. And if we go further and hone in on Terra Valentine, it gets pretty serious pretty fast as it relates to the steepness of the incline. And I think this has got to be not only extremely rewarding, but also intensely challenging to craft and produce wine up here. So what is it about mountain fruit that captures you, and why? And by the way, it captures me as well, more so than valley floor fruit. What is it what does it bring to the final product that is different than valley floor?
Well, I think that this view really shows you the diversity in the terrain. And so when you're working with a 100 or 200 acre vineyard on the valley floor, you're going to have very little diversity in those soil types. It's going to be very consistent, and you're really shooting for kind of uniformity in that vineyard. And if you look at Spring Mountain and all these different blocks, you know, there's different soil types, there's different exposure, there's different elevation, there's cooler locations, there's warmer spots, and all of those little blocks, those just little corners of those vineyards are going to give you different, you know, different flavors. So actually these vineyards that you're looking at are Paloma's vineyards. So these are my neighbors. So I'm the backside of that mountain.
No way.
And so right where you are there is, so I don't have,
Can someone get Google on the phone and let them know their map is wrong?
Yeah. No, yeah, you try following that on your GPS to find us, and you'll get lost pretty quick.
Well, are you over here?
Yeah, that's the bottom of our property. You can see kind of those cleared fields there, and then and as you kind of rotate over to the right there, you'll see kind of the top of the property. So in fact, this estate, this property, we've just been up here since 2015. So we're just in the process of getting all of our permits to plant vineyard and to build a winery on that site. So, but I work with vineyards that are kind of scattered all over that mountain, kind of both the Napa side and Sonoma side.
And is there different, I mean, obviously we're familiar with a lot of your neighbors, from the Keenans to Kane to Schweigers to Pride, pretty famous mountain up there. Does every part of is it soil structure, elevation, exposure, you know, above the cloud line, all of that just imparts its own nuance to the final flavor of the bottle or what wine you're getting? How do you balance it all?
Well, I think each site, you know, you're going to have certain things that are fixed, you know, your exposure, your soil type, like you can't do anything about that. but what you plant there, so whether you plant Merlot or Cabernet Franc or Riesling, or and what rootstock you use, how you choose to farm those vineyards, that's where the winemaker begins to really kind of have their input on what the character of that fruit and what that wine is going to be from those different sites. And so that's what I really love about Spring Mountain, is that it's with how diverse the terrain is up there, and how the different soil types, the different exposures, what you plant there and what you grow there, and your house style, how you farm that vineyard, when you pick the fruit, what you do in the winery really will make your wine taste much different than your neighbor's wine, even if the vineyards are very close by. But there will be a family resemblance. There are some characters from the fruit that you get on that mountain that are going to be in all of the wines, regardless of what clone you're using, how you're farming. So like in Spring Mountain, we often talk about this cocoa powder texture to the wine, this almost kind of chocolatey flavor in the red wines. And you hear a lot about the Rutherford dust, but I always talk about the Spring Mountain cocoa powder, because it's that bittersweet chocolate. It's there. It's really, and certain vintages you might get more of it, and maybe how ripe you pick or how you farm might impact how much you get. But it's definitely something that is kind of a common thread, and kind of a family resemblance in the reds from up on Spring Mountain.
That's funny. And I am a huge fan of that cocoa powder dust. And it is interesting that I just love Spring Mountain fruit, but no one after 20 some odd years of drinking it has basically, or as elegantly as you just stated, has that fingerprint, if you will, throughout great Spring Mountain cabs. And you're right, there is that cocoa powder dusty softness to it that is just fantastic. What you mentioned that each producer is going to have that little bit of signature that's going to be consistent across, but there's also winemaking techniques, what you do, how you grow, and the viticultural aspect of it. What is your philosophy?
I think, broadly speaking, my goal is to, really try to coax out that distinct character of the vineyard in the fruit without having to do too much input. But, in general, I'm a very strong proponent of very low irrigation. So as little water as we can possibly give those vines, in order to have them really focus in on ripening the fruit, getting small berry size, a little more intensity into the wine. I do a lot of canopy work. I think canopy work on Spring Mountain is very, very important. So, when I say that, I mean about like the leaves, pulling the leaves on the morning side, shading the leaves on the afternoon side. Because if you see in those, those vineyards, there's a lot of, there's a lot of turns, and the vineyards are often following the contour lines. They're not a straight line. And so you really have to protect some spots from afternoon sun, and other spots you need to really encourage sun to get in on those clusters to make sure you move away from those vegetal flavors, greener flavors, which you can get on Spring Mountain. It is a cooler location. We get a lot of that influence from the Pacific Ocean, as you can see from that map. And so, if you're not careful with that, and you overwater and you have huge canopies, you can end up with green flavors in the wine, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But for me, I think, people are really looking for, I want to show off the fruit and the spice and the richness. But I still feel like, my goal in the end is to have balanced wines. So I want to show off the character of those vineyards with its personality, but I also don't make wines that are kind of overblown. I don't push those vineyards so far that I'm picking as ripe as I possibly can to make the biggest wine that I possibly can. I want these wines to age. I want them to go with food. I want them to be balanced. And that kind of harkens back, I think, to, learning how to blend wine and tasting the wines that my dad was making in Napa in the 70s and 80s, which were a very different style than a lot of the wines from Napa now. And so I think you'll see that kind of a consistent thread through my wines, is that they're not overblown. They're definitely ripe enough to where you're getting fresh, ripe fruit flavors without that kind of overdone jammy sweetness to the wines. And that's sort of, and that's, I think, starts in the vineyard, with getting ripeness, getting good flavor without having to push the sugars too high.
It's interesting, you mentioned vegetal characteristics, and that's I'm fascinated by the fact that a lot of that has to do with canopy management, because you make a very, very decadent Cab Franc that is anything but vegetal, that's actually being enjoyed by someone right now. And that too, I would imagine, has benefited from canopy management, because there's a lot of, I don't want to say bad Cab Francs, but boy, you instantly know it because of its green pepper, vegetal characteristics. But when you find a fantastic Cab Franc, that wine absolutely sings, and yours is in that caliber. So is that all canopy management?
It's partly canopy management for sure, and I do. You know, Cabernet Franc is really one of my favorite grapes to work with on Spring Mountain. But one of the critical parts of Cabernet Franc is it has to be planted in the right locations. So both, the Cabernet Franc that we planted on the Yverdon vineyard in the past, and the Cabernet Franc that I work with now, were both planted around the same time, kind of the early 2000s, and they were planted in those vineyards on the shallowest, rockiest soil in that vineyard. So places that you would normally think are very well suited for Cabernet, we actually took those spots and planted the Cabernet Franc, just to kind of double down on insurance that we weren't going to get those that have vines that were too vigorous, meaning they're going to grow these big canopies and kind of tend to contribute more of those vegetal flavors in the wine. So it starts sort of with planting on really rocky, well-drained soil. And then it comes to kind of making sure you're getting a lot of light in on that fruit itself. And you have to watch your yields. You can't overcrop it. You have to really manage so each cluster is hanging there. It's not bunched up against other clusters, and that it's getting the right amount of morning sun. But you have to protect Cabernet Franc from the afternoon sun. It's really susceptible to sunburn and bleaching out it from too much sun and too much heat. So it is somewhat more fragile than Cabernet Sauvignon.
That's fascinating, and I'm a big fan of Cabernet Franc. So I'm glad that you have a dogged pursuit at near perfection on that mountain with those. It's interesting. We talked about the Riesling, and another variety that you grow that is not very popular, Sangiovese.
Right.
So where was that inspiration? Because the Amore has also been very well received in the wine club, and we've actually got a lot of folks that have sent us emails saying that was amazing, and people tonight are even drinking it. So
nice.
How Sanjo, and or why Sanjo, and the inspiration behind that?
Yeah, so that's another grape that we actually don't grow ourselves. I've been working with a vineyard over on the Atlas Peak area, and it's actually owned by the Antinori family. So you're talking about legendary Italian family, and so in the
19
late
generations or something like that.
Exactly, yeah. So in the late 90s, they planted a vineyard up on Atlas Peak, and the Antinori family actually brought over cuttings from their vineyards, their Brunello vineyards in Montalcino, and planted it up on the top of Atlas Peak. And so in 2002, the founder of Terra Valentine, Angus Wordle, came to me. He'd just gotten back from a trip to Italy, and he said, it'd be really great to make a Super Tuscan. Those wines are so amazing. And my first instinct was like, oh, this is going to be a disaster. Like California Sangioveses are pretty terrible. Like, How are we going to do this? How is it going to compare to the Spring Mountain Cabernet? How am I? And so, I set out to kind of find fruit, and I really was lucky to stumble upon this vineyard up on Atlas Peak. So it was, mountain grown fruit, which sort of, again, that's in my wheelhouse. And it's the Sangiovese Grosso clone. So it's not that you're kind of light Chianti, in the basket bottle with the candle sticking out kind of Sangiovese. Oh. This is a Brunello version of Sangiovese. And so, smaller berries, really intense fruit. And so I've been, making that Amore for quite a while. And I do blend in a little bit of Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Cabernet from Spring Mountain. So about 10%. I blend into that Sangiovese just to, fill out the pieces in that wine. But I think it's really a fun wine. I mean, it really is, can go with all types of food. I mean, we used to jokingly call it our pizza wine. I mean, it's a wine you can really just kind of pop the cork and drink, regardless of what you're eating or if you're eating.
Or
And,
if you're eating.
yeah, I mean, if you just want to, drink your calories, it's a great wine for that.
We're very familiar with that exercise routine. On Spring Mountain, how many acres do you have under vines?
So right now, the Spring Summit Ranch property we bought in 2015, it's 112 acres, and currently there's 0 acres of vineyard on that property. So I couldn't afford to buy any property that had vineyards already planted on it. So I had to buy raw earth. And there's a small house there that we were using as for our tastings and kind of as our office. But I've been working with vineyards on Spring Mountain and, on the Sonoma side, relationships that I have that go back, 2 decades. And so for me at this point, I've been able to really continue to make the great wines that we have in our portfolio by working with neighboring vineyards, where I have a lot of control. I have a lot of say in what happens. The founders of Terra Valentine, Margaret Wordle, Angus has passed on, but she still owns the Wordle vineyard, where I still get some Cabernet Sauvignon. So, it's not on my balance sheet, but it's still, a vineyard that I have very close connection with. So,
Right.
I do hope to plant our vineyard, our property. So there's about 10 acres plantable. I've had a guy up there calling for the spotted owl for 3 years. I've had all the plants and animals studied up there. And so it's a process, so I'm mired in that process right now, but hope to kind of be making some headway. And with the recent fires, everything has sort of changed now. That whole mountain is changed. And so, I'm hoping that I can get some vineyard going in the ground pretty soon. I think it'll be a good way to help that land heal after the fires.
Well, and I think, and you talked about an office and a tasting room up there, and tragically that also succumbed to the fire. And I think you just said it from a healing standpoint, a vineyard project to put it in the ground and start it from scratch, boy, that could have some cathartic effect.
Yeah, I think so. And I was always very conflicted about, there are some parts of that property I thought this is a slam dunk for a vineyard. And, then I'd go out and I'd be hiking through the woods with my kids, and we'd be hunting mushrooms and looking at wildflowers. And I'd be like, wow, this, it's beautiful forest. It's tough. It's not something I set out to convert that forest into vineyard. But after these fires, it feels very different. And with the forest now changed forever, at least for decades, it feels like there's some amount of vineyard, particularly up around the top of the property. So as we rebuild, vineyards are very good fire breaks. So it seems like it's just a very prudent thing and appropriate now. Whereas, 2 or 3 years ago, it was a little bit more, conflicting.
Right. And I know you talked about a fondness for Cabernet Franc, and a relatively, probably unfair, might not be strong enough question. Do you have a favorite wine that you produce off the property? And is there one that is squirrely, that's a devil of a wine to produce, but when you do produce it, you're very glad that you engage in that battle?
Yeah, I feel like, at the end of the day, the wine that I end up being the most proud of is my reserve Cabernet. And I bottle that under a label that I call Fortell, which is Foretell. And so it's my reserve Cabernet. And I always blend in a good amount of Cabernet Franc. I don't make it in every year. I make it in the years where I really feel like this is a wine that can stand to the test of time. It's one that can age for decades potentially. And
wow.
And that's really, to me, I do feel like that is kind of the paramount blend. Now I feel like moving forward, the Cabernet Franc is a wine that I'm always really enamored with. That's the wine that I do end up, that and the Merlot, I'll kind of go through phases where that's really all I want to drink. And right now I'm kind of into the Fountaingrove Cabernet Sauvignon. So that's
a relatively newer size of the portfolio, and I do have a couple folks, Scotland in particular, I think mind-blowing Cabernet might have left or is on the screen in the chat with regards to how excited he is about the Fountaingrove Cab. So go ahead and share with us kind of the philosophy behind that area.
Yeah, so I mean, up until, so in 2014, the Wordle family got out of the wine business, and I bought the Terra Valentine business from them. So at that point, it was just the brand and our club membership, our inventory, but no hard assets, no real estate involved. And so, you know, I set out right away and started kind of finding a new home estate for Terra Valentine. And so in 2015, we bought the Spring Summit Ranch estate, which is up at the top of Spring Mountain, on Spring Mountain Road. But it's, interestingly enough, it's actually the first property across the county line into Sonoma. And so as you cross the county line from Napa into Sonoma, it ceases being the Spring Mountain District AVA and actually becomes the Fountaingrove District AVA, which is a new AVA that was just started in 2015. So, you know, very few people have heard of it. But it encompasses the Sonoma County side of Spring Mountain and Diamond Mountain on that Mayakama mountain range.
Cool.
And so I thought, you know, here I am. My driveway is on Spring Mountain, in Spring Mountain District, but our property is now in this new Fountaingrove District on Sonoma. So I thought it kind of feel like I have one foot in either side, and we're kind of positioned right up at the top, looking out over both Napa and Sonoma. You can see the Pacific Ocean from there, and you can look down and see Calistoga, the vineyards there. So it's a really unique perspective. And I wanted to start working with fruit on the Sonoma side, because it's the way the birds are flying around, you realize it's not that different. You know, it may not say Napa Valley on it or Spring Mountain District, but it's still part of that region, that mountaintop region on the Mayakamas mountain range there. And so the 2016 Fountaingrove District Cabernet is the first vintage of that wine. Comes from a vineyard that I'm under an NDA, so I can't tell you the name of that vineyard, but
there's no, actually, Sam, everyone dropped off. You can share.
Yeah, but it's basically just to the west of Pride Mountain Vineyards. So Pride is another one of my neighbors that their property is about 60% Sonoma, 40% Napa. And so on all their bottles, they don't say Spring Mountain or Fountaingrove. Right. They say 60% Sonoma, 40% Napa. And so this vineyard, that Fountaingrove Vineyard, is just to the west of them. And, you know, so it is a little bit cooler, I would say. I mean, it gets more sun than the Napa side because it's west facing. So you get long afternoon sun, but you do get a little bit more cooler, kind of cooler breezes, cooler temperatures overall. So the fruit tends to be less black fruit and a little bit more red fruits, which I really love. I mean, but it's red currant, it's dark fruit still, but it's a little bit more finesse, a little bit more elegance versus the kind of more, you know, darker, more, you know, hedonistic style maybe you get on the Napa side.
No, that's a great description. And Doug Rutherford, while we all may not be from Minneapolis, there are worse footsteps to follow in than Angus Wurtles. So I agree with you there. Which brings us to our second poll question. And this might have an ink flare or an art flare to it. I don't want to give it away, though. So let's go to question 2. Emma, this evening, this is a little factoid for all of you. So the brain processes visuals 60,000 times faster than text or listening. As humans, we can remember what amount of what we see and what we read. 80% of what we see, 10% of what we hear, 60% of seen, 25% of what we hear. We can remember 100% of cat videos and 0% of insurance seminars. Like I said, we drink serious wine at Cellar Angels. We just don't take ourselves too seriously. So this one has a little bit of science to it. So for those of you that have studied neuro-linguistic programming, I count myself among them. Let's just see what we have to learn with regards to what the brain can retain visually versus what we hear. So I'll give this another 5. Do you have any ideas, Sam?
I don't know. I'm thinking for me personally, it's definitely the 80-10.
We'll go 5, 4, 3. We have people with videos, cat videos. I love it. 2. Final votes. And we're done. All right, let's see what we got. So Sam is in the 80-10 camp and he didn't even vote. We've got 50% of the audience going with 60-25 and a lot of people that have perpetual free time to look at cat videos. The answer is in fact 80-10. So you are correct. And I think it's interesting because being a winemaker, you have to visually look at quite a few different attributes with regards to the vine, to the grapes, to the canopy. So you're visually remembering all of that. That actually makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, it's really like, it's interesting because when I'm learning a new wine or I'm trying to understand wines, if I'm not there kind of looking at the terrain, looking at the topography, looking at, the exposure, if I'm just reading about the stats, it does nothing for me. But when I can see those vineyards and taste the wine or see the regions, then I go, okay, yeah, I understand why this wine tastes like it does. I can see what's happening in the vineyard. I can see how these vines are growing, and I can taste those attributes in the wine.
Very cool. We talked a little bit about the fires, and that's giving you an opportunity to, as it basically has literally and figuratively cleaned the slate, so to speak. And now you're going to be starting over and potentially building a new vineyard. That's going to be part of the future. But as it relates to the portfolio, as it relates to the family, as it relates to kind of your aspirational goals as a winemaker, what do you want to see in the next 1, 3, 5 years?
I'd love to see some rain this winter, and I'd love to see a year where, we could, not have any devastating fires. It's not too much to ask, I don't think, but it's right now, Spring Mountain and the Napa Valley is sort of just reeling back on our heels right now after these fires. I mean, we're still literally, you can't even go up Spring Mountain Road right now. It's still closed. I was up there with our insurance adjusters earlier in the week, and there were still fires burning on our property that we had to tell CAL FIRE about some hot spots. So, I mean, it's still really an active event. And so, to a certain extent, I'm still quite numb from it all. And, seeing the heartache of our neighbors, Kane Winery, every building on their property practically burned down. Marston Winery burned, Sherwin Family Vineyards, their winery burned, Ritchie Creek, Barron's family. I mean, we're still in this state of complete shock, and it's going to be a long road back. Now, when you look at the view behind you, for instance, that's the view from our lookout, our deck up at Spring Summit Ranch, and our little lookout deck did not burn; it survived. And being up there a couple days ago, looking out, it's going to bounce back. It's not completely gone. It's, you can see where there's some areas that are pretty damaged, but, I believe it'll come back. And so, going through this period of time and seeing our community struggle, and so many people lost their family homes. And that's the part that, we still feel really lucky, even though we lost so much. We have our family home in St. Helena, which was quite threatened. I mean, the fire burned within a quarter mile of our house. So, in town here. So, but our hearts are really with our friends and the families that have lost their homes, their family homes, and there's a lot of healing to do. So it's going to be a long road back. And certainly as we kind of plan, okay, what are we going to do now? I mean, like you mentioned, we kind of have a blank slate on this ranch to kind of start carving back, breathing life back into it and making it something for us. I do look at our future, and I always felt like this project was going to be a long-term, kind of decades-long project. I think that still, holds true, and if not even more so now. And I know that, if I have one of my kids that wants to get involved, I mean, that'd be great, but it is something that, to do it right, it takes more than one generation to come in and start from scratch and develop a mountain estate and really get it up and running and on. So in the meantime, I have great vineyards to work with. I'm really lucky. I make my wines at a facility down in St. Helena that was unaffected. All my wine is stored in a warehouse before it's shipped out to our customers. So, the majority of our business is totally intact still. And so really it's kind of building on that and marching forward.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of adjectives used to describe the wine industry, but as our personal friends, specifically in Napa and Sonoma, I think the most important adjective is resilience. And, you know, in 2012, we had the earthquake, and then you had fires, it seems like every year, and you just don't know. It's hard enough, right, as an industry and as a hobby or profession hobby. As a profession, Mother Nature is different every single year. And to have all of this extra stuff to have to deal with, your resilience is just really second to none. And quite honestly, it's inspiring. So if it's something that we can do and we're trying to do, we can help build back better, so to speak, then I think we should do it. We tell a lot of people, because they'll reach out to us and they'll say, what can we do? And I'm like, buy wine. Just buy wine. You don't have to buy it from us. Just go to their websites, buy wine. And I don't want to give the answer away to the final poll question, but I may have. But the resilience that you have, and you talked about Marston family, and Elizabeth is a second generation, and then you talked about the Schweigers, you know, and Diana and Andy are second generation, and you're second generation. So there's a whole family on that mountain, and everyone was impacted in some way, some very large ways. So the resilience you all show is noteworthy, and certainly something that I will always raise a glass to. So cheers to you for what you're doing.
Yeah, cheers. You know, and I think being a farmer, you know, growing grapes, and, you know, you're in agriculture, so you're used to Mother Nature throwing you curveballs, you know, like you kind of do build up some kind of, you know, resilience and from that, I think, initially. And I think we've just been hit harder. I mean, I you know, my wife and I bought this company, and you know, that's what we do. This is our livelihood. And you know, we bought it in 2014, like you mentioned, that fall before our even first harvest. There was the earthquakes, and we lost all of our barrels, crashed over where we were making wine. And, you know, then the 17 fires, which were near us, and you know, it's been one thing after another. And then, you know, COVID this year was really threw a wrench into, you know, visitation, you know, and selling wine in restaurants. And but I feel like, you know, we still have a lot of good things here. You know, we live in a beautiful place. We've got our family, and we've got our community, you know, and we're all in this together. And it's going to be a long road. It's going to be a very tough road. There's no doubt about it. And we'll have our good days and bad days. But, you know, seeing the support from all of our club members and customers and people that have known our wines, you know, people like yourself, Martin, and that have, you know, poured out their support and said, hey, how can we help? I mean, it's really unbelievable. It really helps keep us all here in Napa, you know, staying strong, knowing that, you know, there's people that believe in what we're doing, and that's super, super helpful.
Good, because we're not going away. So we're going to continue. I mean, we started the company 10 years ago to tell stories, and we're a storytelling company, and the stories we like telling and we tell exclusively are those from Napa and Sonoma. We don't tell any other stories. Some stories are worth $2, and I think you know where I'm going with that. Other stories are worth quite a bit more, and certainly when we get to meet and go behind the scenes of great people like yourself in this industry, it just makes what we do all the more worthwhile. And Curtis Stanley, you are absolutely correct. Your humility, Sam, and your perseverance and resilience is impressive, and it's something that we can all learn from. Your passion, Debbie Long is admitting, is really, she admires your passion and commitment to the grit. And to the grit. I mean, it's okay if Mother Nature wants to throw a curveball now and then, but it's those odd years where she rolls up her sleeve, lights the curveball on fire, blindfolds you, and wraps it in barbed wire that really, those are not the fun ones. So I want to actually, you know, wrap up because we've got a lot of final thanks to give. First of all, Sam, thank you so much to you and sharing the story. And by the way, I was really interested in the fact that your house is in Napa and Sonoma, and you can see Calistoga, you can see the Pacific, you can see, I just want to know, is there a guest room that I should be telling people about? Is there anything what's that look like?
Well, the house that we lost, sadly, was pretty small. And so we had offices in there, no bedrooms, but, you know, we have our Airstream trailer. The first thing I did when I got up there that night and there was fire everywhere, I hooked my truck up to the Airstream and pulled it out of there. And so that's going to be the first thing that's going to go back up there, is our Airstream.
Build around the Airstream.
Yes, exactly.
There are worse design plans. Well, I'm not done thanking you yet, but I want to thank all the folks at Birch Road and Kim for putting that event together in Chicago. And we hope everyone enjoyed this great in-depth interview with Sam and featuring some of his wines. You guys got to enjoy the Riesling, as did I. I moved on to the Reserve Cabernet, of which is absolutely fantastic. So Kim and the Birch Road folks, thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate it. We hope everyone stays safe. And then Emma, I want to bring you back on and actually see what I'm afraid to see what Sam
I'm a
and
little
I
scared.
talked
I'm a
about.
little scared, Martin.
Are you all able to see my screen?
Yes, we are.
Great.
Oh, nice.
I like the canopy management.
Thank you.
That's cool.
Wow. And for those of you that have registered via Zoom, I think we're going to be sending this out to everyone.
Yep, and we'll post it as well.
And we're going to post it online as well. People in the studio are telling me that that wasn't true until I said it. So now that it is true now.
It's
So
always true.
it was always true. So I'll let Denise chime back on, and we'll let everyone get on their way. But that is actually super cool, Emma.
That's really cool.
Thank you. Thank you. Great conversation, you guys.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for the kind words. And Emma, I need you to stop sharing, and then Denise and I are gonna, oh, perfect. Everyone on the comment line, and Sam, we're gonna send you the comments in a little bit. It was very, it was clean this week. So I'm very happy with the group. They behaved for most of it. But honestly, Sam, thank you and your family. I know you got a busy household with 3 children. So be well. We'll be in touch. We can't do this without you. And thanks so much for all you've done and your persistence and attitude. It really is humbling and inspiring.
Yay. Well, cheers. Thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Cheers, my friend. Be good.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.